Hey there, this is Kim on the Startup CPG team. Did you know that over 70% of in-store promotions are not effective and over 80% of brands will fail while promoting at the shelf? But you have to run promotions with retailers. So what's the solution? Thankfully, PromoMash, the only all-in-one promotion management platform, and Crisp, a leading retail data platform that integrates with over 40 retailers, have developed a joint solution that gives CPG brands a level of visibility and control they've never had before over their trade spend and promo performance. A free 30-day risk-free trial is available exclusively for Startup CPG members. Just go to promomash.com/startupcpg. PromoMash is spelled PROMOMASH. To see for yourself what more effective promotion planning looks like, that's promomash.com/startupcpg, or the link is in the show notes.
Just because somebody has a lot of experience doesn't mean that they have experience taking a company from zero. I don't know, maybe we were like 100,000 in sales to 200,000 in sales, and then to 1 million, and then 5 million.
Welcome to the Startup CPG podcast. I'm your host, Jessie Freitag. Today's episode is really special. Kara Goldin, the founder of Hint, agreed to come on the show to talk about leadership. Kara founded Hint in 2005. And the company is best known for being the first unsweetened, flavored water with no preservatives on the market. She scaled Hint to over 30,000 retail locations and over 150 employees. Kara has been named one of InStyle's Badass 50, Fast Company's Most Creative People in Business, Fortune's Most Powerful Women Entrepreneurs, EY's Entrepreneur of the Year 2017 Northern California, and in 2021, Hint was named one of Inc.'s best-led companies in America. She's also been featured on How I Built This, a really great interview that I recommend, and her book, Undaunted, has been a Wall Street Journal and Amazon bestseller. And actually, due to some technical difficulties, my time with Kara was cut a little bit short, so I've included at the end of the episode a bit of a book club where I share some of my favorite pieces from Kara's book, which I highly recommend. Listen in as Kara shares about leading during tough times and her mindset, stories from leading during the pandemic and how Hint grew 40% during 2020, how Hint expanded business with Costco, Sam's Club, Walmart, and Aldi during the pandemic, the early days of growing Hint and leveling up as a leader and how lack of industry experience can be an advantage, communicating effectively and with transparency, especially during uncertainty, and how follow-up is critical, managing employee growth and development as a leader, and more. Hi, Kara. Welcome to the show today. I am so excited to have you here. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I've got your book right here. It's got its like reflective library cover, and I'm drinking my Hint water, and I loved your book. Like I picked it up and I was like, oh, I'm going to interview Kara. I definitely want to read her book. I'll read it before bed. I'll just read one chapter. And yeah, no, I couldn't put it down. I read half the book that first night, and then I did really have to fall asleep, and then I finished it like the next day. So it was so fun to get to read some of your story, and then now get to talk to you today.
Oh, I love it. Well, I think it's really applicable to people who are in it, right? That they're, trying to get through stuff. They're not really sure how they're going to get through stuff. It's the times when things are really, really hard that I found so many people have said, like, this book has really helped me to know that I can do it. And I tried to leave a little bit of humor along the way, because, if you can't laugh at some of the stuff, as I always say, you can't make the stuff up along the way. It's just so nuts. And you've obviously, dealt with many of those issues just being in operations and supply chain. And I can only imagine, especially during the last couple of years, what you've had to endure or had to, or basically what you've seen.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, it's so good. I definitely recommend it to everyone. I'll link it in the show notes in case some of our audience members haven't listened. But, today what I wanted to discuss with you was kind of the topic of leadership and how it evolves, and the work that you had to do as the organization, as Hint changed and grew. And I think what really stood out to me, it might have been in the book or an interview I listened to with you, or listening to your own show, because I love your podcast as well, where you talked about leading during the pandemic and how Hint actually experienced major growth during the pandemic. Can you share with us about how you had to adjust as a leader during the pandemic to help your team through a scary and challenging time?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think that the key thing that I've learned through challenging times is it's during those times that the previous challenging times really help you to figure out how to lead best. And nobody really knew what we were being hit with the pandemic in terms of how long it would last, right? And exactly what what would happen with schools closing down and having employees that were having to homeschool kids. So to some extent, I feel like the challenges of 2007, 2008, during the financial crisis, being a very young startup, we started our company Hint in 2005. I was able to kind of use some of those lessons where essentially everything that you knew about, the way that the organization works, and in terms of departments and you could almost put people into pods to some extent. There's the finance group and the marketing. Some of those rules just go out the door, right? So when people are having to deal with their family, when people are having to deal with a great amount of stress and anxiety, that everybody sort of, regulates differently, you have to show your human side of who you are, and get people back to a place where they're calm, they feel confident and comfortable. And so I think what I've learned is that when you can get people back to that place, when you see people being very anxious, maybe it helps in some ways to have been a mother as well, that you're basically trying to get people back to where they can actually, be themselves in many ways. That was the key thing that I learned. But we also felt like the other thing that we learned back in 2007, 2008 is you think about, you make the best guess at what is going to happen, and you have to be able to pivot, and you have to be able to pivot the team. And the team will look for leadership and guidance, and somebody who is showing them the way. But I think that more than anything, saying that you have no idea what you're doing or we're doing it this way is not the way to lead more than anything.
That's great. I love that. And can you tell us any specific stories from that time?
So our specific experience during COVID was basically, I had seen in mid-March that we have an office in New York City and also our main office in San Francisco. And I had been in New York I actually flew out on March 11th and walked into our office on the afternoon of March 11th and really noticed how the team was quite stressed. And New York was, really ground zero for COVID, at least in the US, where the first cases that people had really started talking about of COVID was at the Gap, which happened to be across the street from our offices. So people in our company were very stressed. Like, were they taking the subway with these people? I mean, where are we going with this? And I, of course, didn't know the answer, but what I could do was suggest to people, why don't we all just work from home? Why don't we all calm down and everybody doesn't have to take the subway, sort of go into triage, so to speak. So that was the first thing. And that's when New York City really started shutting down on Thursday and Friday of that week. And when I flew back to San Francisco on the night of the 13th, I stopped in a Target store where we have a huge distribution for Hint. Actually, I wanted to pick up a couple of things. I got off the plane in San Francisco and I popped into the Target close by SFO. And I noticed that we were totally out of stock on product. And I thought, wow, like, where's the back stock? So, being the founder that I am, I walk into the back room at Target at close to 9 o'clock at night and look for the back stock. There's no back stock. So I walk up to the cash register and ask them to look up Hint and see, exactly what the EDI, the back end of it, and how much stock is actually in stock. And they said there's none in stock. And I thought that was incredibly strange. So I actually got on the phone again, I don't know why I did this or what sort of prepared me for this, but I called another Target store and I said, do you have Hint in stock? And they said, we're out of stock. I knew that we had plenty in the warehouse, but it was at that point that I really realized that there's an issue here. We had been hearing about product, hoarding at stores, et cetera. But it was really me being on the ground floor and actually seeing that this was occurring was what gave me kind of some clarity that this is really bad. And I think there's just a lot of, issues there. So that weekend was really when we made some phone calls and emails and realized that it was much more out of control than I think anyone was talking about at this point. But we knew we had product in our warehouse. And so we started ordering trucks to be able to put these into stores. We're now at Monday morning, and we said to our team that we need to get into the stores and just make sure that all these stores have it, because the data that we're getting out of these stores, which says that we're in stock and they should have plenty of stock, for some reason it's not making it from the warehouse into, whether it's at the distributor or actually in a warehouse for Target. And that was just one example. It wasn't making it. So that's when the world was really starting to shut down. And we took people who would normally be doing other roles in the company, including sampling, because we weren't going to be doing that, and reallocating them into other roles. So as that week moved on, people were starting to ask, people were totally willing to be reallocated into jobs to, all hands on deck and make sure that everything was going well. But they were also trying to deal with their own life, right? And their own family. We're an essential product. So the definition of that was that it was mandatory that we needed to make sure that product was in stores, et cetera. We were also, by the way, it was a crazy time. We were launching Walmart chain-wide, Sam's Club chain-wide. And then 2 weeks after the pandemic started, we got a phone call from Costco, who was interested in going across the country with Hint as soon as possible, because many of their products could not deliver. And because we did everything in the US and we didn't have the supply chains issues that other people had dealing with bringing in cans, for example, from China, when that part of the world was shut down, Costco wanted us to be able to deliver. So nobody in their right mind would be saying yes to, right? I mean, you understand this, to Costco, Sam's Club, and Walmart. Oh, and one other, Aldi. I mean, it was crazy, but we said yes, not really knowing whether or not we could do that or not. But also, when we went back and asked the team, what do you think? I mean, can we do this? To some extent, the warehouses were easier because there was a lot less, people on our end that needed to kind of handle it. We still needed, from a production standpoint, to be able to handle it.
On the note of production, can you share a little bit about that piece?
So that side of things, on the production side, we co-pack. We don't own any of our own plants, so those weren't our employees. But what we did do, because we were planning on 2020 to just be a pretty, nice little hockey stick. We didn't know it was going to be a giant hockey stick, as it ultimately, we grew 40% in 2020. We had automated and put different change parts into many of the plants that we were co-packing it so that we could keep up with the volume. So because we had made those decisions to do a lot of automation, we felt confident that we would be able to deliver, so long as we weren't going to have to put a lot more stress on our team.
Very interesting. Thank you. And just going back a little bit, I also just wanted to say that I love how you just were willing to go in the store and figure out exactly what was happening. You seem to be a big believer of just kind of going in and figuring out what's going on for yourself.
I felt like you can't really lead and tell people to go into stores, do this, unless you're willing to show them. And I've always felt like, even in a non-pandemic or challenging or stressful time, that actually understanding not only what somebody's role is and what they do, which is, I think, the beauty of startups, is that, if you actually understand, as I always say, enough about finance and supply chain to get you in trouble, right? You're going to hire people who are maybe better at you than those roles or love those roles more. But if actually understanding what they do, I understood how to go into a store, walk into the back room, etc. I hadn't done it in a while. On a daily basis. I hadn't ridden in a truck on a daily basis, but it was during this time when I'm telling people to go and do this, I thought, I need to do this myself and make sure that everybody is safe. And what would make me feel safer? And so as I was going through that process, I got up early one morning and knew that Target was opening at 6 a.m., our local Target. And so I got to the store right at 6 a.m. to kind of see what was going on, thinking there aren't going to be that many people there. And what I realized, I was about 15 minutes earlier. It was like 5:45 a.m. And I realized that there were people in the store. And so I knocked on the door and I said, hey, I work for Hint. Is it okay if I come in? I just wanted to check our supply. And they let me in. And it was at that point where I thought, I feel a lot safer because there's nobody in the store. And, and again, no one was talking about this or doing this. It was really, I think, if you can actually go in and kind of see for yourself, I've always felt like that is the best way to lead. So, and of course, got the masks and all of those kind of things in order to be able to make the team feel a lot more comfortable, but also make people in the stores feel more comfortable too. We were probably one of the first to actually be offering branded masks to many people in a time when people were actually looking for masks. So
right. Yeah. No, that's super interesting. Thank you for sharing about that. And it just shows your willingness to go in and figure it out and be the boots on the ground. And I really love that. And I love that about your stories. I'm also curious about how you've if there were moments as you were growing, like thinking back to maybe some of the earlier days of like your first few employees, maybe even like starting to get into the 5-10 employees, were there any moments like as a leader where you had to do some reflection of like, oh, I'm going to have to learn, XYZ skill, or like I'm going to have to modify something to like continue to grow? Because it seems like you have done so much, you're so intentional about what you do. So I'm curious about like what that intentionality looked like as you have grown as a leader.
I think this was the first 17 years ago when I started Hint. I had never run a company. I had worked for entrepreneurs and supported them, which was great experience, but I had never, and I had managed people, but I had never been in the CEO role. And so it was new and unique. I think that coupled with the fact that I moved into an entirely new industry. And I always tell people, when you're learning something new, I'm totally willing to learn something new, but most normal people are challenged at some point, no matter how confident you are. If you run into somebody, maybe you're a little tired and you run into somebody who actually knows what they're doing and they've got lots of experience, you're more than willing to hand over the keys, right? That you're like, oh my God, you have 10 years experience at Pepsi doing this job that I know that I need to be doing. This is here. Will you come help me? Well, you have great experience. You know exactly what you're doing. The thing that I didn't realize until making some mistakes, those early leadership mistakes, is that just because somebody has a lot of experience doesn't mean that they have experience taking a company from zero. I don't know. Maybe we were like 100,000 in sales to 200,000 in sales, and then to 1 million, and then 5 million, right? They have walked into those roles with systems in place. They haven't created the systems, right? And that is a huge difference. So when you are leading a team and hiring a team, I think that is such a key thing, because if you're hiring somebody in who's actually going to be able to like work the system, then they're able to, that's really much more of a, support system than actually a leadership role. And I think like that is the thing that I learned along the way, because I thought I could just hand over, for example, the operations side of it or the supply chain side of it early on. Operations and supply chain were all one and the same, I guess, especially in those early days. But I think like that's the most important thing, because again, you want to hire somebody in for those roles that are definitely creators. Maybe they haven't created an entire company, but the key thing is to be able to hire people in that know how to create, this segment, I guess is the best way to look at it. And then as we grew and that role needed more people in it, I think that the thing that I also realized is that somebody who is able to create something is possibly different than somebody who's able to manage a whole bunch of people. And so that was the thing that I realized as we started to grow, is really asking the question, what does this team really need, right? Is there somebody who can really organize and is used to managing? And frankly, when they come from a large CPG background, that is where those skills potentially come into play within a startup, is that they can manage people, they can grow teams, that, depending if they're used to, really looking at a division that it has grown significantly versus something that is growing, 1% a year, which if they're coming from a large public company, they just don't really understand it. And I think also somebody who is used to working in a scrappy environment, that isn't used to having, access to lots and lots of resources. I think that is really, the key thing, because that's the big problem, is that when you come from an environment and you're hiring in somebody expecting them to lead a team, and they're going to want a giant team to somebody who is $1 million in sales versus 100 million in sales is a very different conversation. And I think that that's the key thing that you have to figure out. And again, I think it really just depends on what the division is. We found many people that we've hired in the past, even for sales, where some people will be, great sales team, participants. But then there's other people who can actually organize and who can lead and manage within divisions. And while they understand the role of sales, they are people. And they know how to manage those people. So if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. Are you looking to grow your product sales with specific retailers? Do you wish you had store-level information about your products? What if there was a way to make sure your next product launch was a success? Social Nature is here to help. Social Nature is an all-in-one shopper marketing platform designed to help emerging brands win at retail. Powered by 1 million natural shoppers, they help you move units off the shelf quickly and get you the store-level insights you need to scale your business. If you're looking to grow at retailers like Whole Foods, Sprouts, Kroger, H-E-B, Wegmans, Walmart, and more, email marketing@socialnature.com or visit business.socialnature.com to learn how. And make sure to mention hearing this message on the Startup CPG podcast. That's business.socialnature.com, or the link is in the show notes. I'm also wondering how you've navigated when you're in the early days and so much is shifting all the time. Like there's so many incredible stories, like, in the book of, navigating, getting into Starbucks, leaving Starbucks, like all these big things are shifting. Your manufacturing, everything's changing. What balance have you struck, or have you experimented with it, of like sharing, again, you've got maybe at the 5-10 employee stage of like, how much do you share of the uncertainty of what's going on, and like, get feedback from team members on their thoughts? And it with being, okay, this is what I think we're going to do because in this moment, people need some certainty. So I'm going to make a decision as a leader. So we go forward because I don't want to freak everyone out. Like there's a certain level of uncertainty that a founder can maybe handle that might freak employees out. But also at the early stages, some of your employees are just right there in the trenches with you. Like, I'm curious how you've tried to like strike the balance of like how much you share about the uncertainty that's happening or your thought processes on things like, and if there's, any advice on kind of managing what to share, what not to share when it's time to just make a decision and go for it, or when it's time to kind of pull the group and it may cause some anxiety for the team, but also at least they kind of know what's going on behind the curtain.
Yeah, I mean, I think you really need to look at the situation and, call it really have EQ. I think that is the best. The best leaders really know how to manage that. But I think that most people want transparency, right? They want to understand that people are shooting it straight. But I think that they want to also understand that they have a job, right? That the company is doing, that is looking out for them, that there's some stability. Look, everyone wants stability, even the best, the best leaders, they want stability as well. But I think that understanding how to keep the team going while also making sure that they're not unnecessarily stressed out, I think is super, super key. Do they really need to understand pieces of information that that are not necessary for them to understand? I think is probably a key leadership. So, is it necessary for them to really understand that there's a component of the automation in the plant that we just purchased that is that has broken, and that the line is actually going to take longer than expected to actually come up? Of course, because it's going to affect their job, right, in some way. But having said that, I think that there's ways to actually share that with people rather than sounding the alarms, actually telling them, hey, listen, here's this problem came up this morning. This is what we're working on to actually rectify the situation. Hopefully we will have it up by the end of the day. And if it doesn't get up by the end of the day, then I think also telling people, what's going on with it. I think that the thing that has bothered me as an employee, right, over the years prior to me starting my own company, is that the follow-up, when there's no follow-up, when you hear sort of something that is troubling to you in some way, but then somebody doesn't follow up, or they're not being, or maybe it's a totally different situation and there's just no follow up after even that. I think that is something that is, you lose trust in the team that you're leading. And I think that is a very, very key thing for any leader, any size company, to recognize. People follow people, right? And they want to follow people that they believe are trustworthy, that are shooting it straight with them, that are trying to, that are actually, to use your term, boots on the ground, right? Like they want to follow people that they believe care. And I think that is probably the biggest thing that I hear from employees, but also from colleagues out there that are trying to lead people, that without authentic leadership, without making sure that people really are being included in a process that they believe that they needed, the leader believes these people need to know for some reason, I think that is really what people are looking for.
Yeah, for sure. And we're almost out of time, but there was one other thing I wanted to ask from the book. I thought that was really interesting. You mentioned that for employees that are really performing well and they're doing awesome in their role, that you kind of keep an eye out for, have they maxed out this role? Like even maybe before they know that they're ready to move. Like I'm curious about any advice, because some of our, a lot of our brands have made amazing first few hires, and you want that person to be with you long term. Any tips for kind of keeping an eye out on that person's career trajectory and making sure that you're communicating actively to, to keep them engaged and happy, that they're not going to start passively looking on LinkedIn without even thinking about it. Cause, they, even though they maybe even like their job, they've kind of maxed it out.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I mean, I think that the key thing is having a culture where people really want to keep learning. And I think that there are definitely people who come into a role and they want to, use operations, for example. They want to stay in operations, but they max out as they start to move up the ranks, and maybe they don't even aspire to move up the ranks. Maybe they, want more money, but they don't necessarily want to be managing people. I've seen that as well. They really enjoy being an individual contributor versus actually managing other people, which I think is also, a longer conversation that I think more and more cultures should be open to that. But I think that there's also skills that people have learned within different segments of an organization that they don't know, they don't think about how they could be transferable into other parts of the organization. So one of the stories that I talk about in the book is a member of the HIN organization who's in finance. And as, finance, as in his role, as he's starting to engage more and more with ops and supply chain and fleet management and some of the other pieces, what he started to really realize is that he didn't understand before how much operations really has to do with finance. I mean, and he had just not really thought about it. And so for him, every single day that he was talking to the operations team, he was learning. And so sometimes the best conversation will actually come from leaders who can actually share the vision of what could be. Like, would you be interested in this? And the answer may be no. I'm really happy just staying in, this room. And I think that it just depends on what people want to do. But I think that ambitious people, which every organization has, rather than actually losing them to another organization, which is going to happen, can happen as well, letting people understand what the different opportunities are within your company. It doesn't just mean that it's within that silo of, finance, operations, marketing. It could be that you're pulling from other parts of the organization because that's where people are really learning. And plus, within your segment of your organization too, bringing in somebody from other parts of the organization brings in different types of thinking, right? And if they're learning and maybe they don't have the experience, and I think this holds true too for people who are maybe coming into your organization from outside of an industry, allowing people to actually ask the stupid questions like, why is it done that way? They can then take their own experience and bring that into the equation to just make you and your organization better, as long as they know that they are able and they're in a culture that is about, it's okay to ask the dumb questions and it's okay. We want to improve and we want to get better. So that's what I found with all of the organizations that I've worked with.
Yeah. That's very helpful. And I could listen to you share stories all day long. So I appreciate you sharing some stories with us today. I'm going to link in the show notes to your book, your website, your own podcast and show, which is awesome, so that people can go and hear more from you. But just so appreciate you spending time with me today, Kara. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
As promised, I wanted to add a little book club segment here at the end of the episode. It's really more of a one-way book club in this medium, but please message me with your thoughts. I just really enjoyed Kara's book, Undaunted, and she didn't sponsor this or anything. I got my copy from the library. I'm an old-fashioned library girl. And I just think there's a lot to learn in this book, and it's really applicable. So I'll share a few of my favorite moments just for fun within the book to both pique your interest and, if you've read it, to see if maybe some of you found similar pieces interesting. So the first one is that she shares this story about losing Starbucks as an account and her learnings about how she handled that tactfully and in a way that allowed them to actually continue working with Starbucks, the locations that are in target locations, rather than if she had just responded with disappointment or in anger or something with losing such a big account. She talks a lot about not taking a loss like that personally, and then also goes into the importance of not having all your eggs in one basket or at one large retailer. There's another great story about telling Whole Foods no when they asked for a BOGO or buy one, get one deal, even though it was tense and they thought they were going to lose the Whole Foods account potentially over saying no to doing this deal. But Kara and her team knew it was a deal that was bad for everyone at the time. And it ended up working out, spoiler alert, but I really found that story interesting. She also talks about how people will ask her what it was like to build out a whole new category since Hint Water was the first of its kind. And she talks about not thinking too far ahead. And I love this one line where she says, "I'm here to tell you that sometimes if you think too much about the end, you will never get past the beginning." And then finally, my last favorite quote for today, she talks about why she loved starting Hint compared to if she had stayed at AOL, which you haven't read about her story of what she built at AOL and her time in the tech world. That's also really fascinating. But she says, at AOL, everybody was asking questions of me and expecting me to supply the answers. Now I was asking the questions, which meant that I was learning every day. Don't tell anyone, but I dog-eared that library book page. So thanks for joining my first and probably only random book club, but please let me know what you think if you read Undaunted. Thank you for listening in today. I'm so honored you joined me for this conversation, and I love hearing from you all with feedback, suggestions, or if you just want to say hi at podcast@startupcpg.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. If you liked this episode, we'd love for you to share it with a friend or colleague, subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and maybe even leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. If you aren't yet in our Slack community of founders and experts, we'd love to see you there. You can get the free invite at startupcpg.com and find all our other awesome resources there, like webinars, databases, the blog, the magazine, and virtual and in-person events. And if you found yourself rocking out to our intro and outro music, which I do every single time, make sure to check out the Super Fantastics on Spotify. It's the band of our Startup CPG founder, Daniel Scharf. I'm Jessie Freitag, your host and producer, and on behalf of the whole team at Startup CPG, thank you for being here and see you next week.